Howdy, thanks for checking out my second video of the channel. Today I want to cover the concepts of speed, aggression, and surprise. You can apply these three concepts and their balance in all facets of life, but they're easily articulated through the lens of gaming or combat. So let's take a look at how you can tilt the odds in your favor by controlling the flow of a situation and staying active instead of reactive. These concepts are not at all new. From the speed and surprise of Julius Caesar crossing the Rubicon or Hannibal Barca transiting the Alps, to the aggression of Genghis Khan or Napoleon, history has countless examples of these being applied well and with strong results to show. But when I think about this in a modern sense, my mind goes to one unit in particular. Britain's Special Air Service is bound to this concept in my mind for two reasons. One is that their name mirrors the acronym for speed, aggression, and surprise. And two, they're the greatest pioneers of modern tactics involving this concept. Their unit made its debut in North Africa doing high-risk raids against Nazi airfields. One of their favorite tactics was to take Land Rovers, affix as much lead-slinging hate to them as possible, and rush these airfields at night, shooting up planes and fuel tanks to cripple German air power in the region. Usually, they didn't go the overt route. They would sneak in under the cover of dark and plant explosives, also likely putting their iconic Fairbairn and Sykes daggers to good use. Over time, they developed into the world's first proper counterterrorism unit where they'd be pioneers on many fronts, solving problems that traditionally hadn't been in the wheelhouse of a special operations unit. They championed speed, aggression, and surprise as a means to successfully conduct hostage rescue missions where action had to be decisive and precise. So let's dive into these individually to see how I apply and balance them for maximum results.
We are losing objective upwards.
Starting off with the fun one, speed. You want to take the initiative and beat the opposition to valuable ground. One of Sun Tzu's more overlooked ideas was that taking valuable land is more important than taking enemy lives. Holding the right position can make many of your opponent's advantages irrelevant. In an overly simplified way that will resonate with anyone who's ever played the smaller maps of a Battlefield game, it doesn't matter if you're outnumbered 5-1 if all 5 of your enemies have to funnel down one narrow hallway that you already have a machine gun trained on. Hesitation often equals defeat. If you've competed at any level in games, sports, or life, you've probably been outplayed before. There's times where your ability to process relevant information is overwhelmed, or that information just isn't there to be processed in the first place, and before you can make a decision, someone else makes it for you. Leaning into one of the largest advantages with speed is leveraging the time that it takes for your opponent to process and make decisions. You can stack the deck in your favor in these moments and often deliver a decisive victory if you're able to realize in the moment that you're ahead of the curve. There's an almost intuitive understanding of a meta momentum that builds when one side is doing particularly well. You can see it easily in MMA or boxing, or even in larger team-based sports like football. People who don't know jack shit about what's going on can usually identify this momentum even if they can't properly articulate why it's there. This rolls back into the motto of the SAS, who dares wins. This is a simple statement with larger implications than the three-word phrase lets on. When you're constantly making small decisions and weighing your new position, you're also constantly gaining more information and building up small wins. An aspect of this that's easy to overlook is the mental side. I touched on it briefly, but while much of this does relate to physical speed, the mental processing involved can be just as, if not more important. There's an excellent book that ties into this called Blink, The Power of Thinking Without Thinking. This book, while covering a multitude of topics, is focused on the power of intuitive thought. One of the tools professionals in any given field use is called thin slicing. Thin slicing in its simplest form is taking minimal data, experience, and intuitive feeling to extrapolate what are usually highly accurate predictions. This process is usually lightning fast and handled by the subconscious. Everyone has had a bad feeling that they couldn't explain that turned out to be justified. This was your brain thin slicing. Getting better at this comes with time. As you get better at any given task, you start to subconsciously automate actions that previously took up bandwidth in your mind. This freed bandwidth can now be redirected towards more creative and efficient solutions to the problem at hand. To conclude on the idea of speed, I'd like to mention the OODA loop, or OODA loop. If you've been through any kind of tactical training in real life, you're probably about to tune me out for a second. Not to worry though, I'm just taking a 10,000 foot look at it, not doing a deep dive. OODA is short for Observe, Orient, Decide, and Act. The loop is a process that restarts indefinitely until whatever the given objective may be is solved. There's loads of information floating around out there concerning the OODA loop, and I'll probably go into more depth on this at some point in the future. A quick example though, using Hunt Showdown, would be that you receive outside or external information to start the loop. Your teammate tells you that they just got shot at. You didn't hear a gunshot though. This is your observation. You orient. This information is more relevant to you if you're 5 feet from your teammate than if you're 100 yards from them. You also know that there's suppressed guns in the game and quieter weapons like bows and crossbows, and your teammate didn't clarify what they thought they were shot at with. You decide that since your teammate is relatively close, you're no longer as safe as you were a few seconds ago, and you take in how exposed you might be in your current position. Lastly is your action. You might slow down and start looking for the shooter, or determine that you've been engaged while in a poor fighting position and you just need to get out of that location quickly. This action would conclude that loop. Now you start a new loop informed by new information and a heightened sense of awareness. Ideally, this is also where you would start trying to impair your opponent's OODA loop and control the situation. More on that in the next section.
A crack. Enemy flag returned.
First and most important aspect of aggression is commitment. Often when this topic is brought up, people use the term violence of action instead of aggression. Either is fine, but the importance of the concept remains. When you decide to do something, do it with confidence and authority. The wrong decision executed forcefully can often yield better results than the right decision half-assed. If you've ever done martial arts, you're well aware of this. Halfway committing to an action in a fight or sparring usually gets that shut down at best or gets you punished at worst. While it could easily be a whole separate topic on its own, I think precision is a unique subcategory of aggression. Precision combined with speed is where the mastery of assaulting lies. Precision combined with surprise is what makes an effective marksman. Studies that were done after the Vietnam War found that on average 50,000 rounds of ammunition were expended by US forces for every enemy killed in action. Those same studies found that only 1.7 rounds per EKIA were expended on average by US snipers. So while a 50,000 round mag dump is overt and powerful, it inflicted comparable casualties to the 1.7 rounds of precision rifle fire. There's an economy in conflict, and knowing where to spend the currencies of resources, time, and energy is the difficult part of applied aggression, but it pays dividends when executed correctly. Ideally, you want to dictate the pace of combat in such a way that you're constantly gaining small advantages. Persistently tilting the scales in your favor can overwhelm your opposition and cause them to make poor decisions or have outright decision paralysis, while you expend minimal effort to gain the upper hand. I had a good example of this recently in Hunt Showdown that unfortunately I couldn't capture due to shadowplay getting turned off. My buddy and I were both running scoped long guns, and the objective where the boss was vanishing at was an area with few good long-range sight lines. We made a bet that the team with the bounty would cross through the cornfield in front of us on their way to extract, so we set up on the far side of the field, putting ourselves between them and extraction, betting that they would inadvertently push directly into us. The bet paid off. We held fire until they were well away from the woods and away from any good fighting position, then we opened up on them. The corn provided concealment, but they had no cover at all, and they were on the low ground below us. We had a solid 20 minutes left on the round timer. All the advantages were on our side. We wore them down with persistent fire maneuver, eventually dropping both of them, taking the bounty and extracting. So in this example, while the actions taken weren't overly aggressive, the plan was acted on aggressively, and it dictated the flow of combat while stacking the odds in our favor.
Alright, hold on. Nice! Fucking nice! Wolfpack fucking succeeds!
Last is surprise, though it quite possibly outweighs the other two in raw importance. Simply put, the enemy can't counter what they're not aware of. Going back to our OODA loop, If you don't immediately win the fight due to having surprise on your side, you should at a minimum be resetting your opponent's OODA loop. Ambushes, traps, baiting, unexpected pushes, all can shift the odds dramatically in your favor. Surprise is often an advantage that you have initially and lose after first actions are taken. Maintaining surprise after first contact usually involves predicting enemy actions or having prepared the area of engagement prior to the fight. That's usually in relation to something large like an ambush or pushing people into a given area for a desired effect. Going back to the concept of building small wins as you act, you can also try to build small surprises. Even something as simple as not shooting from the same location twice in a row builds micro surprises that break predictability. It sounds simple, but the next time you play an FPS, pay attention to how many kills you get on people who peek the same corner repeatedly. Sometimes you don't have an option to relocate while staying in the fight or not giving up valuable ground. In that case though, you can take even smaller actions like crouching on one peak and standing on the next. Take whatever reasonable actions you can to break patterns and predictability. You're constantly in a battle for information. Minimizing the information that your enemy receives and maximizing that for yourself assures that you can have better situational awareness than your opponent. I laid these out individually because I think each has its own merits, but realistically you want all three. I think about these as a triangle. Being in the middle of that triangle is ideal and where you have everything stacked in your favor. Once you lose one of these though, you want to turn up the other two. If there's a mountain between you and your enemy, then your aggression is at 0. But you can up your speed to minimize the time that you're exposed and shift your attention to good route planning to maximize surprise. After executing an ambush and you're in the fight, surprise is gone, but you can turn up speed and aggression. A sniper all gillied up laying in a field has no speed and very limited aggression, but all the surprise that you could hope for. So it's a constant balancing act of reading your situation and applying these correctly. Thank you so much for taking the time to check out my channel. I'm very new to this and learning a ton. I decided to try this video scripted, but I do plan on doing more off-the-cuff stuff in the future and seeing what comes out better. Please like the video if you enjoyed it, dislike it if not, and leave me a comment with any recommendations you have or things that you'd like to see. Or if you just have a good story, real or digital, about when you use speed, aggression, and surprise to make a big difference. Stay sharp guys, catch you next time.